Hi, Brian Lehrer here. Up next, Brian Lehrer Weekend. 3 of our favorite segments from the week packaged together for you to listen to on the weekend. So enjoy, and I'll see you back on the radio Monday at 10 a.m. on WNYC and WNYC.org. It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start today with some breaking news for New York and New Jersey that also is breaking news for the nation. President Trump, if you haven't heard this yet, said yesterday he would use the government shutdown to permanently cancel the Gateway Tunnel, already under construction as a major upgrade for Amtrak and the NJ Transit, New Jersey Transit commuter railroad into and out of Manhattan. It's not just an upgrade, it's also a long-awaited repair since Superstorm Sandy back in 2012. But here's the president at his news conference yesterday responding to a reporter's question.
The project in Manhattan, the project in New York, it's billions and billions of dollars that Schumer has worked 20 years to get. It's terminated. Terminated.
Schumer responded by saying to the New York Times, and of course Schumer is the senator from New York and the Senate Minority Leader, Schumer responded by saying, Gateway is the most important infrastructure project in America, period. Donald Trump trying to kill it again is pure spite and stupidity. It's petty revenge politics that would screw hundreds of thousands of New York and New Jersey commuters, choke off our economy, and kill good-paying jobs, unquote, from Chuck Schumer. Governor Kathy Hochul amplified that. She said, this is not sticking it to New York. This is the northeastern corridor to make sure that our tunnels are safe. They're damaged by Superstorm Sandy. And she said on MSNBC, if this system of transportation collapses, the northeastern economy and the economy of the country collapses. So it's national as well as local, at least from the way they're arguing it. And also in this respect, Trump was open at his news conference about using the shutdown to lay off workers and end government services from what he has called Democrat agencies and permanently lay off workers specifically from those.
We got the people that we want paid, okay? And we want the FBI paid, we want the military paid. We got the people that we want paid. And I'll tell you, the Democrats, they don't talk about this. You know, we're getting rid of programs that we didn't like, but that were negotiated in, but we didn't like. We're terminating those programs, and they're going to be terminated on a permanent basis. And it's thousands of people, and it's billions of dollars. We're getting rid of a lot of things that we never wanted because of the fact that they made this stupid move.
Stupid move being the shutdown, as Trump argues it. The president yesterday, with me now, Democratic Senator Andy Kim from New Jersey. Senator, thanks for coming on to respond to these developments. Welcome back to WNYC.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
First on the Gateway Tunnel, this is a $16 billion project already being built. What's your understanding of what the president is actually ordering here?
Oh, well, look, he said that he wants to see it terminated. And, I'm demanding immediate clarification from the White House and the Department of Transportation on exactly what this means, because, that would be absolutely catastrophic, not just for New Jersey and New York, but for the entire country. I mean, and Secretary Duffy, who is a resident of New Jersey, a constituent of mine, he's told me before how this Gateway project is of national importance. It would cripple our nation's economy if something were to happen that severs train access in the Northeast corridor. This is something that would generate, over 100,000 jobs. It's something that would benefit our economy enormously. And it benefits Republicans, Democrats, independents across the political spectrum. So all that Donald Trump is doing is using mob boss tactics that are just hurting the people of America. And I just think that that is absolutely reckless. And it's something that we have to stand up against.
That's a serious charge. Mob boss tactics. What do you mean by that?
People see this. I mean, he says it. He says the quiet part out loud. Which is that he said, he's going after Democratic projects and this or that. I mean, like That's the kind of stuff that's just beyond, just beyond the pale. I mean, we serve the American people, all of us. He's president of everyone in this country, not just the people who voted for him. But he doesn't think that way, and that's where sort of the unhinged aspect of his approach is taking. I had this one woman. She was an independent voter in New Jersey. I talked to her just a couple days ago. And I asked her if she would want to say something to Donald Trump. And she said, yes, I would tell him and remind him that this is our money. It's the American people's money. It's not for Donald Trump's personal bank account. It's not for him to use to settle political scores and to seek political retribution. I helped pass the bipartisan infrastructure law that has projects going all over this country, including in areas where the Republican members of Congress voted against the infrastructure law. It's meant to help everybody, not just, those who are in power and their, patronage networks. And that's what I find so disgusting, honestly, and I'll use that word, disgusting, about what the president's doing, is he is weaponizing our government. He's politicizing it in a way that is meant to just benefit, his supporters. That's the American taxpayer dollars, not his.
If the president is serious about stopping these projects, Gateway and Second Avenue Subway, what recourse do you have to fight it?
Yeah, look, we're looking into and the legal actions in terms of being able to step up. But again, what we need right now is that clarity. And we need the White House and the Department of Transportation to issue clarity today on this, because we cannot see a stoppage of this work. I talked with a number of construction workers that engage with infrastructure projects like the Gateway Tunnel. I talked to them and asked them, what would happen if this is something that pauses or halts construction? Not only is it going to affect their jobs and livelihood, but it would be enormously expensive to get this back up and running. And if Trump really follows through with with what he said of terminating this, I mean, again, that would be absolutely catastrophic. This project cannot move forward without federal support. And that's why we have, a contract. We had an agreement between the federal government and New York, New Jersey on this. And Donald Trump is clearly breaking that. And that's unfortunately in line with just the broader lawlessness that we continue to see from this administration. And look, that's why we need a fighter in New Jersey. That's why I hope the American people and the people of New Jersey see that we can't have someone like Jack Ciattarelli as our next governor. We need a governor like Mikey Sherrill that's actually going to stand up for New Jersey and not just do what Jack does, which is just kiss up to Trump, say that he'd give him an A rating, says he doesn't have anything that comes to mind that he disagrees with Trump on. This is a clear delineation of what New Jersey needs going forward. And I think Trump just basically ended Jack Ciattarelli's chances of being the next governor of New Jersey.
Oh, well, you brought the governor's race into this, but I read in the New York Times that Ciattarelli posted on social media that he opposes this move by the president. He has said in the past he gives him an A, but he's opposing this. So how do you make this a Ciattarelli issue?
Oh, look, I mean, Ciattarelli said the other day that he's not hearing people talking about the Gateway Tunnel in New Jersey. Yes, I mean, look, after a lot of pressure, he finally said that he disagrees with the president, but he did it only in the context of his own job. He said, we need someone in the governor's office that can work with President Trump. Again, Jack Ciattarelli is only thinking about this in terms of himself, and that's because he's been running for governor longer than my kids have been alive. He's not somebody that's actually thinking about the many tens of thousands of people that'll be affected right out of the gate, as well as the economic consequences of this. So the fact that he didn't just come out and just flatly condemn what this action is, and instead is just trying to couch it in terms of his own job prospects, I actually found that to be even more offensive.
I want to get back to the national context, but one more on the Ciattarelli-Sherrill context. Is he wrong when he says New Jersey would be, I guess now I'm using my words, but his implications seem to be that, if New Jersey has a Democratic governor, the way Trump is acting with these partisan cuts, New Jersey is going to get punished. If they've got a Republican governor, he will work for them, work with the Trump administration, and Trump won't have that political incentive to hurt New Jersey. That would be a reason to vote for him. That's what Ciattarelli is arguing.
No, absolutely not. I mean, first of all, Chitterelli said he wouldn't sue the federal government, wouldn't sue the Trump administration if they did things that hurt us. I mean, look, we've already
The
seen
state
these
government
attacks
wouldn't
on.
sue? Go ahead.
And look, these are things that we've already seen. What Jack Chitterelli will do will just give ICE officers free reign across New Jersey. Then he'd allow Trump to just be able to do anything he wants. If he wants to send the National Guard into Newark or Camden or Trenton, he's just going to give him free reign to do that. That's a problem. He's not working with Trump. He's working for Trump. He is somebody that is just trying to do whatever it takes to be able to be the governor and is willing to sell his soul down the road in that direction. That has no integrity. I can't
Okay.
stand this kind of weather vane politics of Jack Chitterelli.
Back to the national context. The president mentioned the selective layoffs in the clip we played. A court ruling yesterday said he cannot permanently lay off federal workers. The federal judge in Illinois who presided in this case, ruled that using the temporary lapse in government funding to cut people's jobs permanently is, quote, both illegal and in excess of authority and is arbitrary and capricious, unquote, from the bench. The administration will appeal that, I imagine. But since I'm sure you agree with the court, why would it be illegal? Why can't the president decide to reduce the size of agencies that are executive branch agencies, education departments, centers for disease control, housing and urban development? These are those being among those being hit with a lot of layoffs.
Because the Constitution says that the president needs to follow the laws of the United States. And the laws of the United States are set forward by the legislature, by Congress. We set the national budget. We set the priorities. We say what that funding needs to go to. The executive branch fulfills that, doesn't have the ability to override Congress. So when we say, yes, we want to have funding for the Department of Education for kids with disabilities, IDEA funding, Donald Trump does not have the ability to do what he just did, which is try to fire all these workers at the Department of Education that are trying to help with special education, to help with kids with disabilities. That's literally who he's firing right now. When we see him again putting out pronouncements again, trying to gut workers from the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education. Well, look, Congress has said, we think that this is important that we follow through on civil rights in education. This is how we fight back against anti-Semitism, against Islamophobia, against so many other challenges that we see that many Americans across the political spectrum care about. He does not have the ability to fire these workers that are fulfilling what Congress has set forward in our budget, in our approach going forward. And yes, we're in a shutdown, but this is something that we're working to resolve. It does not give a permanent ability for Donald Trump to say that this is not what Congress is putting these money towards. So this is just absolutely wrong and illegal by Donald Trump.
So it would be good for everyone if the government shutdown ends. Democrats are pegging it to extending the subsidies for health insurance policies bought on the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, marketplaces. Those purchases are being made very shortly this time of year for 2026, and many Americans would get socked with higher premium costs that might make them not able to afford health insurance at all. But here's Republican Congressman from New York, Mike Lawler. He's proposing a 1-year extension of the subsidies, a full year, to get the government open again and have another full year to work out how to fix Obamacare costs more broadly. Here he is on Morning Edition.
If you want to solve an issue like the Obamacare subsidies that Democrats put in place for 4 years and were slated to expire at the end of this year, they knew that they were slated to expire. They passed the bill. And so I have already signed on to legislation to extend the subsidies by a year. And that was part of my point to Hakeem Jeffries. If you're serious about this, if this is the issue you claim it is, then why won't you sign on to this bill with me?
So far, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House, is rejecting that proposal. So is his own leader, Republican Mike Johnson, the Speaker. What's your reaction, Senator? Might this be a good compromise for 2026, and then you'll see which party wins control in the midterm elections?
Well, look, I know it's very convenient for Representative Lawler and others to say we'll just kick this can down the road just enough that it gets us past the midterm elections and the things that they're worried about the most. But look, that's not going to help lower costs. That's not going to stabilize our healthcare system right now if they just see this as a short-term punt. This is something where we need to address. And all I'm asking from Representative Lehrer and others is that they put the same amount of energy into helping make healthcare affordable for Americans that need it than they did lowering taxes for billionaires earlier this year when it came to their reconciliation bill. That's all we're asking for, is just with the intensity and the urgency with which they had and extended these massive tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, just put some of that energy into trying to help lower costs for families that need it.
So last question, and back to the Gateway Tunnel. This has been a bipartisan project for the most part, with bipartisan support. Democrats and Republicans in New Jersey want this. Democrats and Republicans in New York have wanted this. Do you have the solidarity of your New Jersey colleagues? I know both senators are Democrats, but have you checked with those members of the House who are Republicans from New Jersey? Are they standing up and objecting to the prospect of the president permanently terminating that project?
No, they're not. I mean, again, this is because they're all terrified of Donald Trump and the idea that Donald Trump in one tweet could end their political careers. It's the same problem with Jack Ciattarelli. Yes, we're seeing 3 House Republicans from New Jersey failing to step up and say just with the urgency that's needed that this is something that everyone in New Jersey is united against in terms of what Donald Trump's saying in terms of terminated the Gateway Tunnel project. So I hope that they can find the political courage needed and recognize that they serve the people of their congressional districts and not Donald Trump.
All right, the breaking news with local to New York and New Jersey and national implications. President Trump saying yesterday that he is not suspending but terminating the Gateway Tunnel project, and saying those other things about layoffs of federal workers, not just furloughs, and the court weighing in on that. Senator Andy Kim from New Jersey, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. Now we continue our 30 Issues in 30 Days election series. Let the corporate media focus only on the polls. We're doing an issue a day for 30 days until the Friday before Election Day, and we're up to issue 18 here on day 18. Should mayoral elections in New York City move to presidential election years? That question is on the New York City ballot. This year, voters are being asked whether the city should move its current primary and general elections for mayor and all municipal offices to even-numbered years, in particular presidential election years. The logic goes that those years see significantly higher voter turnout than the current odd years system. It's always the year after the presidential that we've been having mayoral elections in New York City. So what's the effect of this? Well, in the last general election, 2021, the New York City Campaign Finance Board reported that of the more than 4.9 million active registered voters, only 1.147 million cast votes, or reduced to a percentage, only 23% of eligible voters showed up to vote for mayor in November of 2021. Now, cities like Baltimore and Los Angeles recently changed their calendars in this way, but not everyone thinks it's a good idea. Some think that national political issues would overshadow the local ones. So joining us now to break down the ballot question and with more of those for and against arguments and who's on what side is our own Bridget Bergen, Gothamist and WNYC senior political correspondent. Hey, Bridget, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Brian.
So 23% turnout in 2021. How average is that for New Yorkers?
Well, we have been seeing steady decline in our municipal general elections since 1989. We saw about 60% of voters participate in that election. And then, we have seen those numbers dipping down to what you just revealed, that 23%, which was a historic low 4 years ago. And of course, That was the general election for an open mayoral seat. That's where we saw Democrat Eric Adams, who at the time was running pretty far ahead of Republican Curtis Sliwa in a race that was shaped by the city's reemergence from the COVID-19 pandemic and this desire to boost public safety. And yet the turnout was very, very low.
And listeners, who has a question about this? Or I guess you can call up and lobby for or against this change if you want as well. But we're certainly here to explain it to you. 212-433-WNYC. That's not our membership drive number. That's our on-air number. Never going to ask you for money on the air. 212-433-9692 if you have a question or an opinion about moving mayoral election years and all the rest of the city offices to presidential election years for Bridget Bergen. 212-433-WNYC. Call or text 212-433-9692. So you note that the group Citizens Union, that good government group, issued an analysis of what happens when cities did shift municipal elections to national election years. What did they find?
Yeah, I first started looking into this issue in large part because Citizens Union did this pretty lengthy analysis a couple years ago, looking at other municipalities across the country that shifted their elections from odd-numbered years to even-numbered years. And one of the key drivers was that in many of these places, turnout had been so low. And so they looked at places that made that shift and how did the turnout change? And one of the examples they included, which was particularly striking, Brian, was El Paso, Texas. They had 8% turnout in their mayoral election in 2017 before they shifted to even-numbered election years. Starting in 2020, they shifted to even years to coincide with the presidential election. Voter turnout in that municipal race was then 45% in the election. And by percent increase, that's a 460% increase compared to that off-cycle mayoral election, which is a pretty staggering number. But it wasn't just in a place like El Paso, Texas. Other cities saw similar increases. Los Angeles switched to even-numbered election years for its mayoral election. The city's last off-cycle election in 2015, the voter turnout there was about 24%. After the shift to even-numbered years, their turnout in their November mayoral election in 2022 to coincide with the midterms was 45%. So again, a significant increase in voter turnout by shifting to those even-numbered years.
There's also the question of who would turn out more than in the current odd-numbered years. And the writer Ross Barkan, who also supports this idea, noted in Crane's, a larger electorate, a truer electorate, would come to the polls. Voters across the ideological spectrum would benefit. Do you have more on that? I think he cited Los Angeles and San Francisco, which also did this, and that no ideological faction could be said to have benefited over the other. But I wonder if there's anything on, who is disproportionately not turning out in the current system, and how has it worked out in the cities that have done this?
Yeah, looking at this particular question, there's a researcher out of the University of California, San Diego, who has been studying municipalities who shifted their elections to even number years. His name's Zoltan Hajnal. And what he said is you really see this dramatic shift in the share of active voters who are both younger and voters who are more reflective of a community's demographics. So oftentimes in a city like New York, that means less white and more diverse, more people of color participating in those elections. And so that's one of the reasons that people who are supporting this say that there is a reason to make this shift to even numbered elections, that the electorate who would actually be participating would be more reflective of the city itself. Mm-hmm. And therefore, those elected officials would feel it more beholden to a broader swath of the electorate and that constituency.
And Ross Barkan, who I think it's fair to identify as sort of a progressive lane writer, notes that comparing San Francisco and Los Angeles, In L.A., Karen Bass, a progressive, defeated Rick Caruso, a more conservative Democrat and ex-Republican. But then last year in San Francisco, moving to even-year elections, a pro-business centrist, Daniel Lurie, was elected mayor. So he's arguing that it doesn't help one faction or another. Here's a negative, Bridget, from a listener in a text. They write, it's challenging enough to keep up with the information on mayoral candidates without that election being overshadowed by the presidential election. And that overshadowed critique is a common one, right?
Absolutely. That is something that you hear from some candidates. I moderated a forum on this topic where this was an issue that some of the people who were concerned with it raised immediately. How could you ask voters to keep up with all of the candidates in these municipal offices in addition to candidates in federal offices all in the same election and make their decisions across all of these elections at the same time? Errol Lewis, the host of Inside City Hall over at New York One, wrote a column with making some similar points for New York Magazine, arguing when you're trying to make decisions about, who is the best person to decide land use issues in your community, or who is the best person to hold the sanitation department accountable, will that get lost if those issues somehow become then, taken into a national context? If the candidates running in your community are not just Democrats and Republicans at the local level, but are branded with the national party and potentially any of the issues or baggage that those brands bring with them.
Let's take a phone call from none other than Grace Rao, the executive director of the Citizens Union, who's calling in. They have taken a position in favor of moving the municipal elections in New York City to presidential election years. Grace, can you hear me? You're on WNYC. Thank you for calling in.
I can. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Bridget for citing our report and research on this and for devoting time to this conversation. I just wanted to address, some of the concerns that we've heard that you voiced as well around the idea of local issues getting drowned out in the context of a presidential race. I'm a former political reporter. I can safely say that anyone who is a regular listener to this show is a well-informed New Yorker and voter. But we, frankly, sadly, are outliers. When fewer than 1 in 4 New Yorkers is turning out to vote for the mayor of New York City, we have a major problem. This is like an alarm going off when it comes to the health and strength of our democracy. And what is so incredible about this reform is we have the data. We can look at other cities and see just how dramatic the boost to voter turnout has been. This reform also saves the city money, which is pretty incredible. But more importantly, what we know is that most voters are doing the work to get informed about the races, often as they head to the polls. The people who are engaged and closely following local issues, I firmly believe, will continue to do so. And what this means is that more and more New Yorkers will actually be having a direct say in choosing the leaders of our city. Right now, we have a problem where there's growing disengagement from government, growing distrust in government. Many New Yorkers look around and say, how did this person get into office? I didn't elect them. I didn't actually play a part in selecting this person to lead our city. That will change dramatically when we make it easier for people to go to the polls, easier for them to have a say, and it will mean that a much more representative cross-section of New Yorkers will be actually choosing the leaders of our city, which is so important.
So you're arguing for, some of our listeners may remember that you were a lead political reporter on New York One for a number of years, and so your former colleague there, Errol Lewis, wrote up this issue in New York Magazine, including some of the arguments against. And one of the reasons that Errol cited that people might not want to vote for it is that it makes New York perhaps even more of a one-party town or a one-party state. He wrote, one reason Republicans in New York have been pushed to the edge of extinction over the last decade no GOP candidate has won a statewide office since 2002, is that voters associate them with a national party that has become stridently conservative and wholly subservient to President Trump. So the implication is that more moderate Republicans would be even further harmed because voters would be, having that coattails effect one way or another based on who the presidential candidate is, and the local candidates may not be looked at as much as individuals. How would you respond to that?
So I have a ton of respect for Errol. I loved working with him at New York One. He is an incredible journalist and civic leader. I disagree with him on this issue. And I think that, I would not make assumptions about how New Yorkers are going to vote moving forward. In the last presidential election, many New Yorkers and many Democrats in the city were very surprised by the results in the presidential election. President Trump did much better than many folks had expected in the 5 boroughs. I believe he won about 30% of the vote, which was higher than when he had run previously. So I don't think we can make assumptions about how people will vote. I do think we can look at the data and know and say with certainty that our democracy is stronger when more people are participating. Right? And right now, Brian, the people who, sorry.
I'm going to leave it there. Clear points. We appreciate your work at the Citizen Union. Appreciate you making this call in and making your case on that. But now that we took Grace's call 4, we're going to take one call against. Paul on the Lower East Side. You're on WNYC. Hi, Paul.
Hi, good morning, Brian. Thanks for having me.
And I see you're an election lawyer and a Democratic Party district leader. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. And from my experience, this will not result in a higher turnout in the elections that actually matter in New York City, which is the primaries in June. We will not be uniting the primary election with the presidential primary. That's in the spring, the convention.
Right, there would still be 2 different dates for the 2 primaries, yes.
Right. And this primary would be in June. There would be no president on the ballot. You would have none of that presidential attention bringing up turnout. You will have the presidential attention in the air sort of drowning. But you'll be united with primaries for state assembly, state senate, and U.S. House, which actually have lower turnout. And then you'll wind up with a 4-page ballot. Half the election, 15 to 20 races per voter. Half the elections will be ranked choice voting. Half of them will not be. It will be very confusing. The mayor's races, the state and federal races will be on the first page. The mayoral race will be on the second page. City council, and I run for district leader. District leader, you'll never find me. I'll be on page 4. And studies show that voters drop off after, 7 elections or so and stop voting. And you will wind up actually, because it will be not a high turnout election, it will be a low turnout primary. And you will have even fewer people voting for down ballot races and not actually get any result. Yeah. You will also decimate the Board of Elections by making them lay people off every other year. And as discussed, it'll drown out voices. And that's even harder on city council races where they're capped by the campaign finance.
Right, which will be on page 5 and 6 and 7. Paul, thank you very much for raising the ballot design issue there. Bridget, we're gonna leave it here. We've heard some arguments for, some arguments against. You've done your reporting on this ballot question for voters in New York City about moving the mayoral and other municipal elections to presidential election years, the pros and the cons. A lot of people are texting one last question. We just have like 20 seconds. But if this gets approved, will the next term of the mayor, Mamdani, Cuomo, or Sliwa, be short to switch it to 2028?
So I'm really glad you asked that, Brian, because this is a vital point that even if this question is adopted, nothing changes unless the state makes a change. This is basically a way to fast track, from New York City's perspective, what would require a constitutional amendment for this to actually be enacted.
A state constitutional amendment.
which, as we know and we've talked about many times, requires 2 successive legislative sessions before then it has to be adopted by voters statewide. So most experts who I've talked to say it's unlikely this could take effect until January 2029 at the earliest. There would be, if it was adopted and was adopted at the state level, 2 successive legislative sessions and a statewide adoption by voters.
Right.
Then there would be a one-time transition from the odd year to even year elections. It would be a shift that would shorten whoever is in office their term from 4 years to 3 years, but that would not count towards their 2-year term limit, the 4-year term limit, excuse me, as I've read in some of Bolt's, et cetera.
So if voters vote yes, they will be starting a state process on moving the elections to presidential election years. And that's issue 18 in our 30 Issues in 30 Days election series. Tomorrow, issue 19, abortion as an issue in the New Jersey gubernatorial race. For today, we thank our senior political reporter, Bridget Bergen, for reporting the pros and cons of this ballot question. Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, and to end the show every day during the membership drive, we're talking about all the animals that New Yorkers love and care for in your homes, your pets. We've talked about dogs on day 1, reptiles on day 2, bearded dragons and tortoises and who knows what. And today let's talk cats. Those sometimes aloof, sometimes purring, sometimes playful, often sleeping, furry creatures. Maxwell Branch, Vice President of Programs at Flatbush Cats, joins us to talk about what they need to thrive. Hey, Max, welcome to WNYC.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for having me on and for talking about pets.
All right, here's where we're going to start. What do you think is the biggest misconception about cats?
Sure. I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier is actually a pretty big misconception about cats, and that's that they can be aloof. Sure, a cat can be a little bit more standoffish than your standard dog, but anyone who has a cat in their house knows that they can also be wonderful companions and, really develop that very special bond that we look for with our pets.
Unlike dogs that we all see on the street all the time attached by leashes to their humans, pet cats in the city are almost indoors. Now, I know people who live in the country who have both indoor cats and what they call outdoor cats, but in the city, it's, almost universally indoor cats. Are the cats cool with that, or would they rather get out, even on a leash if necessary?
Sure. New York is in particular a tough place for cats to exist outside. There's traffic, there's rat poison, there's lots of dogs, there's lots of stuff going on. So we typically don't recommend to our adopters that they take their cats outside. There's a small segment of cats that wouldn't be happy with an entirely indoor lifestyle. And for those, we encourage folks to look into things like leash training for them. But really, your average cat is perfectly happy, even in a relatively small apartment. And what you can do to make sure that they stay that way is provide a lot of interaction and enrichment for them. Things like wand toys, things like daily training sessions. I have a lot of fosters and adopters who've even had a lot of success training their cats to do fun tricks. So keeping their brain busy in that way is a great way to make sure that they're happy, even if they're just within the confines of your 4 walls on their day-to-day.
But if they can't get out to run around, what can you do to keep them happy with an indoor life? Are toys important, or any tips that even some cat owners listening right now may not always think about?
Sure. I hear all the time that oh, my cat's not interested in toys. It just kind of lies around. And what I've discovered is that you really have to work with your cat to find out what their bingo toy is. And for a lot of them, that's something called a wand toy. So they come in all shapes and sizes, but usually it's some sort of stick with a string and then a fun little dangle on the end. Lots of cats will go wild for that. You can look online for videos that will teach you how to play with your cat with one of those, and it usually goes really well. My cats aren't huge wand toy fanatics, but what they love are these tiny little springs that they bat around the house all day and they think that that's great, you can go ahead to your local pet store and pick out a few options, see what your cat loves. And once you find something that they like, you end up with a drawer full of them and you pull them out from under your couch all the time. But it's nice to know that they're happy while you're away and doing human things.
Listeners, anybody want to chime in real quick with a text message on your cat's favorite toy? What's your cat's favorite toy? We don't have time for phone calls in this segment, but if you want to text, I'll read it out. 212-433 WNYC 212-433-9692. What's your cat's favorite toy? For Maxwell Branch, Vice President of Programs at Flatbush Cats, is purring a sign that they're happy, or can it mean different things?
That's a great question. Purring is most often a sign that a cat is super content and happy, which is lovely because that's what we associate it with. In really rare cases, purring can be a sign that they're in pain and they're self-soothing. So if your cat's not a real purrer, or you're noticing other things that are making you think that they might not be super comfortable, it's time for a vet visit just to get all of that checked out. Cats are really great at hiding illness, hiding discomfort. So if you notice anything unusual, even if it's purring, time to give your vet a call or take them on in.
If you follow cat owners on social media, you'll often see references to their making biscuits, that phrase, making biscuits. So for the uninitiated, what does that refer to?
Sure, it's something pretty cute, and yes, you do see it on social media a lot, where your cat will take its little paws and kind of knead into something soft, ideally a blanket, sometimes less ideally, and they can get a little pointy. That's, again, sort of like a content, self-soothing behavior. We see it in particular with cats that were separated from mom too early. So they're exhibiting the same kind of behavior they would when they were nursing. And that's a movement that they carry on through to adulthood.
Oh, here they come, all these texts. You ready for a few?
Of
Cat's
course.
favorite toys, jumping up at the shadows I made on the wall. Crumpled paper ball. Me, the cat's favorite toy, somebody writes. Me. Tin foil balls everywhere.
Sure.
Those little sparkly pom-poms. My cat loves the pumpkin. I guess it's the pump of the Jergens lotion.
I can imagine that makes quite a mess.
And somebody else wrote cat video games. Is there such a thing?
Yeah, you can actually download those on your iPad or your iPhone or whatever tablet you have. I haven't been able to get my cats interested in them. I've tried a lot, but there'll be like a little fish or a mouse on the screen and they'll bat at it. For the person who texted in and says that they're their cat's favorite toy, hopefully that's a fun experience for you. But if it's not and they're getting a little grabby with hands or feet, there's definitely things you can do to like encourage them to use something else for their hunting instincts. And again, like the rest of the visitor or texters had some great options to try to distract your cat from your
And of course, somebody wrote, the empty box the toy came in. Thanks to Maxwell Branch, Vice President of Programs at Flatbush Cats, for all this great feline info. Awesome.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for listening to Brian Lehrer Weekend. We're back on the radio Monday morning at 10 a.m. In the meantime, follow us on Blue Sky at The Brian Lehrer Show, where there's always a conversation 24/7.